Hi, it's Maureen Curis here with Radiant Morning, and today I am talking with Karen Campbell-Wood. She's a licensed clinical social worker and bereavement counselor, and she's going to help walk us through how to deal with grief in the time of coronavirus. So, Karen, how are you?
Thank you. I'm great, Maureen, and so appreciative to have this chance to talk to you about this work that is near and dear to both of our hearts. For sure, it is a challenging time
Yeah, I mean,
in so many ways, but I think especially for grievers right now.
yes, and there's grief on so many levels. That's another topic.
Right.
So I'm going to jump right in. So does guilt factor into the grief process when people cannot be with their loved ones at end of life?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, I think it's an issue for virtually every griever in one way or another.
Yeah.
Um, but I think during this time of coronavirus, people can't be oftentimes with their loved ones. They're wondering what the last days, hours, minutes were like for them. And it weighs especially heavy
Yeah.
on them. So, that there are, I guess, some sort of functional aspects of grief
Mhm.
or of guilt in grief. When I think of guilt, I think, sometimes there is what we would consider to be illegitimate guilt, right? A caregiver who just truly gave their all, every step of the way through years of caregiving. But maybe they stepped out of the room when their loved one died, or they went to get a haircut pre-COVID. And then they feel just racked with immense guilt because they missed this significant event, or they second guess decisions that they made along the way, you
Yes.
know? So sometimes we have what society would look at as maybe illegitimate guilt. Sometimes there's legitimate guilt. You may have played a role in the demise of your loved one, knowingly or unknowingly, in an accident situation, a car accident or something. So there's that. And guilt sometimes serves a protective function. It During a time when life has kind of gone a little upside down and crazy, right? And our assumptive world is shattered because this person that we so loved and counted on is now gone. It can sort of make you think that you had more control in the situation than you might have had.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh gosh. All of those are so powerful. When you talk, I've never heard of illegitimate guilt. And when you say that, my dad, I was at my parents' house and my mom just did not want to be away from him when he died. And we finally convinced her there was a caretaker in, and I went in and saw him it stayed about 5 or 10 minutes, and he finally was peaceful. And I went back. I was sleeping on the couch, and within 5 minutes, the caregiver came out and said, "I think your dad's passing."
uh,
And I ran to get my mom. And by the time we got back, I said, "Mom, Dad's gone. He's died." But for me, I had that illegitimate guilt. I had that guilt that, oh, I should have stayed. I just should have stayed those 5 extra minutes. I should have been there holding his hand. But, as you and I both know, they go when they want. And sometimes they don't, people don't want someone with them when they die. And I think
Absolutely.
that was my,
Maybe it was just it would have been too hard for him to go with you
yes.
there.
Yeah.
No?
And so I've known that, oh, it took me a long time to get over that. And so that's so funny. Illegitimate guilt. Thanks for teaching me something new.
Well, and that's the difference between the head and the heart, right?
Yes.
So your
Right.
head sort of rationally knows it, but that's not how your heart feels.
No, no. So that is really just a great thing to learn today. Well, I have another question. Have the coronavirus restrictions impacted the ability to mourn?
Oh, sure, of course. The ability for people to be present with their loved ones, to gather with their faith community or their family. It's absolutely changed, really, the way we deal with the end of life and funerals. And I think funeral homes are doing their best. to try to, allow drive-by funerals and online memorial tributes, that where people can leave comments that maybe they would have said in a receiving line kind of situation. But yeah, it's had a huge impact.
It's a whole new world. And I think that it's going to impact people for much longer than just the traditional grief, when you're able to have the closure and the ceremony and rituals.
Right. And that's something that I would encourage people to do even now.
Mm-hmm.
It may not look like the ritual, if say you're Catholic and you're used to having the big, the traditional Catholic funeral mass, you may not be able to do that right now, but there are things you can do, right? You can, create a ritual of your own that maybe has music that was meaningful to you and your loved one. Yeah. You could light candles. You can even cook their favorite, a meal that they were renowned for making, sort of as a tribute, as a way to honor them. I mean, there are so many things that we still can do, even though we can't do some of the traditional things that we used to rely on.
I'm going to share a story. I just heard this from a woman. I was booking a hotel room for my son's graduation a year from now, and she was sharing just out of the blue that her father-in-law died, devout Catholic, as am I, but he wanted that traditional funeral, Catholic funeral, and they couldn't have it because there were restrictions of no more than 10 people. They had a big family, and they were just fretting about what to do. And her sister-in-law went to a church down the road. So she called the pastor of that church, and it was non-denominational. And he said, sure, we'll do something out in the parking lot. So he had a ceremony, religious ceremony. He tried to tie in some of the Catholic ritual that he could into it, but they had a car receiving line. She said for an hour and a half, people came and just talk to the family through their car window about shared stories and what that person meant to them. And she said it was so much more meaningful than any Catholic funeral she had ever been to. And isn't that a nice thing? People they figure it out. But now they have that great memory of that new way of doing it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it forces us to be a little bit more creative.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we can't mourn.
Right.
It just may look different than it would have a year ago.
Yeah. And, I think when we can figure out those new creative ways, it helps us get through the grieving process, that it's a natural process instead of keeping us stuck in one phase of grief. How have supportive community resources around grieving been impacted through this coronavirus?
Well, I think the resources that are currently available are swamped in a lot of ways. What I would encourage people to do, if they find that they're having trouble with their grief, maybe they're, not sleeping well, or they're angry or short-tempered, or eating too much or eating too little, and any of the signs that we have that kind of say, wait a minute, this is not going well. I would encourage people to look to online support groups. I know there are a number of Facebook pages and websites like Megan Devine's It's Okay That You're Not Okay. Option B is another good one. That was started by Sheryl Sandberg when she lost her husband suddenly.
Right.
And, also hospice. Local hospices will usually offer support group attendance to community members on a space available basis.
So even if their family member was not a member of a hospice patient?
Correct. Yeah. If space allows. I do have to add that caveat. But yeah, I know a lot of local hospices are doing Zoom support group meetings. Nice. Some are doing some telephone groups for folks who live out of state.
Nice.
Be here in person. So those are resources people can consider. And, obviously, if anyone is in a really bad place, I would encourage them to call the National suicide hotline, which is 1-800-273-TALK, TALK. So there are some things out there, and there are some really good books too that can be helpful at this time.
There's one that I gave a friend. I'd heard of it. I wasn't ready to say goodbye, I think, and I can't remember
Oh,
the
yeah.
author. But it was a really just a wonderful book when you're grieving. So, because so often we aren't ready to say goodbye. Well, you answered my last question. Where can people find resources? And I'm so glad that you mentioned the suicide hotline, because I think that there's a lot of increased mental health issues around all of this, and, you know, around ineffective grieving, inability to grieve, and that it's caused a lot of challenges. And so it's so important to for people to remember that resource too.
Right. Well, I mean, people are under a lot of stresses that they aren't normally under, right? You know, we
Right.
don't know when we can travel again. A lot of plans have had to be canceled or rescheduled. Some people don't even know sort of economically, you know, how secure they are, if their job is secure. So it's important for folks to know that they have places where they can
Yes.
reach out if it just all gets to be too much.
Yeah, that's just such a great resource. So, Karen, thank you for joining me today. I have loved learning from you now that I have my new phrase, and realize that I went through it myself. But I really just appreciate you taking time out of your day to share with us, and I hope people learned a little bit. And I'll put the some of the links that you mentioned in the notes below so people can find those resources
Great.
if they need
All
them.
right. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Maureen. It was lovely talking with you.
It was lovely talking with you too, and I'm sure we'll meet again to have further in-depth conversations. So thanks
I
so
look
much,
forward to
and
it.
everyone just know that we all grieve differently, and each way we grieve is okay, and there's no right way. We all do it our
That's
own
right.
right way. So,
Yep.
okay, thanks so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.